There is a particular kind of document that tells you more by what it refuses to say than by anything it actually contains. The Harlan County Grand Jury transcript from the October 1888 session is that kind of document. The transcript runs to 41 pages. It documents, in the summary language of a recorder doing his best to keep pace with spoken testimony, 3 days of proceedings concerning the Combs family of the Upper Poor Fork Valley. It produces 3 indictments on charges that are, by the standard of what the testimony itself contained, remarkably modest, and it concludes with a note in the recorder's hand that reads, "The jury has voted to seal Exhibit Bundle C. The sealed exhibits are delivered to the court clerk under separate cover. The jury's reasons for sealing are not entered in this record." The sealed exhibits from the October 1888 Harlan County Grand Jury session are in the Kentucky State Archives in Frankfort. They have been in the restricted archive since 1888, with a notation on the folder cover indicating that they were reclassified as accessible in 1952, following a standard review, and then re-restricted in 1954, following a petition from the Harlan County Attorney's Office citing the continuing presence in the county of individuals related to the subjects of the exhibits. The 1954 re-restriction is still in effect. The folder is in the archive. The notation is on the cover. The exhibits are behind a restriction that was put in place 70 years ago to protect individuals who, given the date of the original proceedings, are almost certainly no longer living. What the 41 accessible pages of the transcript contain, and what the sealed exhibit bundle was meant to extend and support, is the subject of this account. Before we begin, drop your location in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. The Upper Poor Fork Valley in Harlan County, Kentucky in 1888 was among the most isolated communities in a county that was itself among the most isolated in the state. I want to know where you are sitting when you hear what 3 days of grand jury testimony established about what had been happening in that valley for at least 15 years. Harlan County, Kentucky in 1888 was a county in transition, still predominantly agricultural and subsistence-oriented in its mountain communities, but beginning to feel the first economic pressures of the coal and timber interests that would transform it in the following decade. The Upper Poor Fork Valley was one of the more remote sections of the county, a narrow, steep-walled drainage that ran north from the Cumberland Mountain Divide and was accessible from Harlan, the county seat, by a road that was passable in summer and barely navigable in the wet seasons. The families in the Upper Poor Fork had been there in most cases for 2 or 3 generations. They were self-sufficient in the ways that Highland Mountain families of the period tended to be, and they were invisible to the county's official institutions in the ways that Highland Mountain families of the period tended to be invisible. Present in the tax records, present in the census, effectively absent from the day-to-day reach of the county court and the county sheriff. Before reaching the Combs family specifically, it is worth establishing what the Upper Poor Fork Valley actually meant as a social geography in 1888, because the geography is foundational to everything that follows. The Poor Fork drainage in Harlan County was one of those places in the eastern Kentucky mountain country where the terrain did the work of governance by default, a narrow valley with steep walls on both sides that produced almost automatically a community that faced inward rather than outward. The road into the valley from the county road network was a single route following the creek bottom that passed through a natural choke point at the valley's lower end before widening into the slightly more open terrain where the households were concentrated. Anyone entering the valley from outside used that road. Anyone leaving the valley used that road. There was no alternative route. This was not an unusual feature of Appalachian hollow geography. It was common, but it was a feature that a sufficiently attentive head of household, positioned correctly in relation to the road, could manage in ways that the county's official road records would not have recorded and that no one outside the valley would have had reason to notice or question. Harmon Combs was positioned correctly in relation to the road. He had been there since 1830, and he understood what the valley's geography offered. The Combs family had been in the Upper Poor Fork since the 1830s. By 1888, the patriarch of the family was a man named Harmon Combs, who was 57 years old, and who had been the dominant figure in the valley's social and economic life for at least 20 years. He was, by the accounts given in the grand jury testimony, a man of considerable physical presence, large, deliberate, with the quality of absolute authority in his household and in the households of the three other families in the valley that had grown up around the Combs property over the preceding decades. He was described by one witness as the kind of man who does not need to raise his voice because everyone in the room already knows what he wants. He was described by another as a man who understood exactly what the valley was and what it was not, and who had made sure for 20 years that nothing came into it that he had not approved. The proceeding that produced the October 1888 grand jury session was triggered by the arrival in Harlan of a young woman named Celia Combs. Before describing what she said, it is worth saying something about how she appeared when she arrived, because Sheriff Cawood's notes are specific about this in a way that official sheriff's case notes rarely are. He noted that she was dusty from the road and that she had walked the full distance from the valley without stopping, which by the most direct route was approximately 9 miles over terrain that was not easy walking. He noted that she was not crying, was not visibly distressed, was not showing the kind of emotional agitation that he would have expected from a young woman who had just walked 9 miles to report something serious to a county official she had never met. He noted that she sat down when he offered her a chair and placed her hands in her lap and said, "I need to tell you some things about the Upper Poor Fork. I have organized what I am going to tell you. I would like you to listen without asking questions until I am finished." Cawood noted that he had agreed to this and that he had kept his agreement, and that when she finished speaking he had sat for a moment before saying anything, because he needed the moment. He was the county sheriff. He had heard a great many things in that office. He needed the moment. The proceeding that produced the October 1888 grand jury session was triggered by the arrival in Harlan of a young woman named Celia Combs, Harmon's daughter by his second wife, who walked into the county sheriff's office on September 14, 1888, and gave a statement that the sheriff, a man named Roy Cawood, described in his case notes as the most difficult statement I have ever taken, from the most composed person I have ever seen delivering a difficult statement. Celia Combs was 19 years old. She had walked out of the Upper Poor Fork Valley that morning alone on the road to Harlan. She had told her father she was going to the store. She had not gone to the store. She had walked the full distance to Harlan and presented herself to the county sheriff and asked him to listen. What she told Cawood over the following 2 hours is in the sheriff's case notes, filed with the grand jury materials and accessible in full alongside the transcript. The statement is specific, organized, and delivered, as Cawood noted, with a composure that suggested she had been organizing what she was going to say for a long time before she came to say it. She described the valley, and what Harmon Combs had made of the valley, and what life inside what he had made of it had been for the people who lived there. She described the 3 additional households in the valley, the Bates family, the Halcombe family, and a widower named Tipton, who had come to the valley in 1879 and had remained, and their relationship to the Combs household, which was structured in terms that Cawood noted in his case. Notes sounded to him as he listened, like something he did not have the right word for, but that was clearly more than the ordinary social and economic hierarchy of a mountain community. The 3 indictments produced by the grand jury addressed specific provable acts, 2 counts of assault related to documented physical incidents in the valley, and 1 count of unlawful detention arising from circumstances that one of the valley's other family members had documented in a letter to a relative outside the county, and that had found its way, through that relative, to the Harlan County Courthouse. The indictments were specific and provable because the grand jury had been advised by the county attorney to indict on what it could prove beyond specific documented evidence rather than on the fuller picture the testimony described. The fuller picture is in Exhibit Bundle C. The grand jury heard testimony from Celia Combs across 2 days of the 3-day session. It also heard from 2 members of the Bates family who had been persuaded by the county attorney to come to Harlan and testify, a decision that the transcript records required considerable effort on the county attorney's part to achieve, and that the witnesses themselves appeared to have made with significant reluctance. The Bates testimony is the portion of the transcript that most directly describes the practical operations of the Combs system from the perspective of the dependent families, and it is also the portion that contains the most explicit references to Exhibit Bundle C, which the jury foreperson mentioned 3 times in the recorded portions of the session, as being more specific than can be addressed in open record about the matters the testimony described. Whether the sealed exhibits are physical evidence, additional written testimony, or documentary records from within the valley that were obtained as part of the county attorney's preparation for the proceeding, is not established in the accessible transcript. The references to the bundle establish that it is specific, that it addresses the same subject matter as the testimony, and that the jury considered it significant enough to require separate handling. What the accessible testimony establishes without the sealed exhibits is this. Harmon Combs had governed the Upper Poor Fork Valley for at least 15 years as a closed system, controlling access to the valley road, controlling the economic relationships between the households, controlling the movement of individuals into and out of the valley with a thoroughness that the 3 indictments address at its visible edges but do not reach at its center. The other families in the valley had been there long enough and had become economically dependent enough on the Combs operation, the mill, the stored grain, the established trade relationships with merchants who dealt exclusively through Harmon, that leaving the valley was not a practical option for most of them. Celia had recognized this and had, at 19, made it a practical option through the simple and extraordinary act of walking out on the road to Harlan on a September morning and not stopping until she reached the county sheriff's office. There is a detail in the accessible transcript that illuminates the scale of what the Combs system had become by 1888, and that connects directly to why Exhibit Bundle C was sealed rather than incorporated into the open record. In the testimony of one of the Bates family members, a man named Edgar Bates, 31 years old, who had been born in the Upper Poor Fork Valley and had never lived anywhere else, the recorder noted a passage that the county attorney flagged for the jury's attention. Edgar Bates was describing the valley's relationship to the county court and to outside authority in general, and he said, "We understood that the county was there, but the county was not there for us. The county was something that happened to other people in other places. What happened to us in the Upper Poor Fork was what Harmon decided happened to us." He said this not as a complaint, the transcript notes, but as a statement of fact, the way a man describes the weather or the terrain, something he has always known and cannot imagine being otherwise. This is the quality of isolation that the Combs system had produced over 15 years, a set of households that understood themselves on a level that went below complaint or grievance as outside the reach of anything the county or the state provided. They were not wrong. The county had not reached them for 15 years. It took Celia Combs walking 9 miles on a September morning to put the county in reach of the Upper Poor Fork Valley, and she did it alone, and she did it at 19, and the county arrived 3 months later in the form of a grand jury session that produced 3 modest indictments and a sealed exhibit bundle. The 3 indictments were tried in the Harlan County Circuit Court in February 1889. Harmon Combs was convicted on 1 count, the assault charge with the stronger documentary record, and fined. The other counts were dismissed on evidentiary grounds. He returned to the Upper Poor Fork Valley following the trial. The 3 additional families in the valley, the Bates, the Halcomb, and the Tipton household, left the valley over the following 2 years. Whether they left because the court action had disrupted something they found unsustainable, or because they feared reprisal, or because the action had simply revealed to them that leaving was possible in a way they had not fully believed before Celia Combs demonstrated it, the record does not say. Celia Combs does not return to the Upper Poor Fork Valley in any record after September 14, 1888. She appears in the 1890 census in Bell County, Kentucky, listed as working in a boarding house in Pineville. She appears in the 1900 census in the same county, married, with 2 children. She appears in the 1910 census, widowed, still in Bell County. She died in 1934, and an obituary in the Pineville Sun describes her as a longtime Bell County resident who had raised her family there and was known for her involvement in the local Methodist Church. Nothing in the obituary references her origins or the September morning in 1888 when she walked out of the Upper Poor Fork Valley and into the Harlan County Sheriff's Office and changed the direction of her life by telling a county official what she had spent 19 years watching. The petition for re-restriction, filed by the Harlan County Attorney in 1954, cited the continuing presence in the county of individuals related to the subjects of the exhibits. Those individuals, if they were adults in 1954, would be well past any normal human lifespan today. The restriction is still in effect. The Kentucky State Archives processes requests to review restricted materials through a formal petition process that requires documentation of research purpose and institutional affiliation. Whether any researcher has successfully petitioned for access to Exhibit Bundle C since the 1954 re-restriction is not established in any publicly accessible record. The 41 pages of the accessible transcript are available to any researcher who requests the file. The Upper Poor Fork Valley in Harlan County is still there, a narrow drainage in the Cumberland mountain terrain, accessible from the county road network that has improved considerably since 1888. The sites where the Combs and the 3 other families maintained their households are not marked. The valley is sparsely settled today, as it was in the 19th century, and nothing about its current appearance suggests the 15 years of what the grand jury testimony described. The road in and out is a county road now, maintained and passable year-round. You can drive it. Here is the question that Celia Combs leaves behind, and it is about the walk rather than the destination. She was 19 years old. She had grown up inside the system Harmon Combs had built. She had never known the valley without it. She walked out on a September morning and did not stop. She organized what she was going to say. She said it. She said it with composure to a man she had never met about things she had never discussed with anyone outside the valley. She did not return. Whatever was in Exhibit Bundle C, whatever the grand jury concluded was too detailed, too specific, too potentially damaging to put in the accessible record. She had carried it for 19 years, and she chose the September morning and the road to Harlan and the sheriff's office as the place to put it down. The county attorney in 1954 thought what she had described was still sensitive enough to re-restrict. The restriction is still in effect. The 41 accessible pages describe the edges of what she told Roy Cawood in 2 hours in September 1888. The center of it is in the sealed bundle. The 1954 petition to re-restrict Exhibit Bundle C was filed by the Harlan County Attorney on the stated grounds that the exhibits contained identifying information about living individuals who were related to the subjects of the proceedings. The Kentucky State Archives reviewed the petition and granted the re-restriction. The review process noted that the original restriction had lapsed through a clerical reclassification rather than through any deliberate decision to make the exhibits accessible, and that the re-restriction was appropriate given the county attorney's representation about living relatives. That representation was accurate in 1954. Whether it remains accurate today, whether any individual living in Harlan County today would be identifiably connected to the specific subjects of the sealed exhibits, is a question the archives has apparently not revisited since 1954. The restriction is in effect. The folder is in Frankfurt. The petition to review is a formal process that is available. Was Celia Combs the bravest person in this account, or was she simply the person who had run out of alternatives? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me whether the distinction matters. If these sealed grand jury transcripts and restricted exhibit bundles and the records of women who walked out of impossible places on September mornings are the reason you found this channel, subscribe and ring the bell. The transcript is in Frankfurt. The sealed bundle is in Frankfurt. Celia Combs walked 41 pages of testimony out of the Upper Poor Fork Valley and left the rest in the sealed bundle, and the sealed bundle has been waiting since 1888. The road is a county road now. You can drive it. The valley looks like any other valley in the Cumberland mountain terrain of eastern Kentucky. Steep walls, a creek running down the center, the second-growth forest that replaced the cleared fields a century ago. Nothing about it, from a car window, suggests 15 years of what the grand jury testimony described. The choke point at the lower end of the valley that Harmon Combs understood as an instrument is now just a narrowing in the road where the walls come close. The households are gone. The mill is gone. The road is open. Celia Combs walked out of it on a September morning in 1888. She organized what she was going to say. She said it. She did not return. She died in Bell County in 1934 and was buried there 46 years after the walk, and the obituary said nothing about the Upper Poor Fork or the September morning or the 2 hours in Roy Cawood's office that changed everything downstream from that walk for the families who were still in the valley when she left it. The sealed bundle is in Frankfort. She put everything she knew into the 41 accessible pages, and what she left in the sealed bundle has been waiting since 1888. Some valleys hold what they held for a very long time.